Well, good morning and welcome to Dave's Devos. My name is Calvin, and as many of you know, I am a hospital chaplain. And I get a question that comes quite often, and it won't surprise you what that question is. The question is simply this: why me? And as you can imagine, that question comes quite often when I'm going down to the emergency and trauma center and I'm meeting with family or I'm meeting with the patient themselves. And the question is, why me? Why is this happening to me? Why, as I'm just driving down the road, minding my own business, does a truck run a stop sign and T-bone me or T-bone my loved one? And now, who knows what the future holds for us? Why me? There's a lot of emotion and heart wrapped up in that question. Or maybe it's elsewhere in the hospital and somebody's gotten a diagnosis of cancer and the treatments they're going to be facing are going to be difficult, and they're asking, why me? I didn't smoke and now I've got lung cancer. Why me? This doesn't seem fair. And really, as I look at my list of patients that I go to see any given day, they range in age all over the place. And sometimes it makes absolutely no sense why this older person is able to survive for so long and a young person is dying. And the question is, why me? And you can just feel the energy and the emotion and the heart behind that question. And I don't labor under any kind of misconception that the people are actually asking for an answer. It's not like they expect that I'm going to boogie my way up to heaven and put a little bug in God's ear and say, hey, God, so-and-so, they're really struggling right now because they don't understand the purpose behind this. So if you could give me a little bit of insight into what you're doing, then I'll go back down there and I'll tell them. They don't believe that there's any answer to the question that would really satisfy them, that would really say, okay, well, now that makes sense. I can go on with my life. And even though this is going to be hard and difficult, everything's going to be fine. No, the question, why me, is all about the emotions and the energy and the heart and the struggle that's going on. So that doesn't surprise us, right? We would expect people to ask that question. I've asked that question myself in times in my life. But there's another time when that question is asked, and that one caught me a little bit by surprise, not only because of the question being asked, but because of the heart and emotion behind it. And that happens when you meet somebody who has had some experience in life, some diagnosis, some accident, some heart attack, or whatever it might be, and they've survived. And sometimes they've survived for many years when people normally don't survive that kind of event. And they're also asking the question, why me? It's a different energy, it's a different emotion, but there's still all that heart there. So I meet with a patient and she says, hey, my doctor said, there's no way I should have survived what I did 15 years ago. And here I am now later, 15 years later, and I'm still dealing with problems, absolutely, but I don't get it. Why did God save me? Why did God rescue me? I'm talking to a patient who had tremendous allergic reaction to some medication, and boy, everything inside was just shutting down. And the doctor had said, boy, people don't usually survive that sort of thing. And he said, as I was being wheeled down the hall, I know that God was with me. And just as with the original question, why me, when it's in those times of struggle and you're wondering, why is this happening to me? Just as in those early times, so also in these times. It's often accompanied by tears. But with these tears, there is this deep sense of gratitude. Why me, God? Why would you intervene in my life and rescue me? I met a gal once, we'll call her Mary, and this was in the context of a church. She was actually joining a church that I was serving on the leadership board of. This was years and years ago. And she had many opportunities to ask that why me question throughout her growing up years. She was still young at the time, maybe in her early 20s. And she had grown up in an alcoholic home where there had been abuse. And sometimes when her siblings had asked the question, and even when she had asked the question, why me, there was a bitterness to it. There was an anger to it. And some of her siblings got trapped in that anger, especially because they were going to a private school, and so they would see all these other people who were experiencing something so much different in life. And so the question was, why me? But now she was coming to join the church. And so naturally we asked her, tell us your story. And as she began to tell us her story, she talked about those hard times. She talked about the struggles and the questions. And then she started to cry. And she apologized for her tears, which still to this day strikes me as wrong. But she said, I'm sorry, but every time I talk about my Jesus, I cry. And I heard behind that statement, or I hear it now, the question, why me? Why me, God? Why would you rescue me from that hard time? Why would you pull me out of that and give me hope and a future when it didn't happen with my siblings? Why me? And there's that heart, that emotion, that deep, deep gratitude. And in her case, also a tremendous amount of energy. She didn't stay at the church very long. It was an inner city church in Grand Rapids, Michigan, but she didn't stay there very long. She ended up moving out to Philadelphia, I believe, working in the inner city with a ministry headed up by Tony Campolo, working with people who were still, young people who were still caught in the same kind of childhood that she had grown up in. And even though she didn't have a good question for their question, good answer for their question, why me? She did know that for some reason God had chosen her and rescued her. And it provided so much energy and hope that she went out to serve others who were still trapped. She met a guy there. They got married and moved up to Buffalo, New York, and started an entirely new ministry, still in the inner city, still with people who were struggling so desperately, so powerfully, bringing them hope that there is a God who is hearing our question, why me? And who occasionally answers it in ways that bring us surprising joy, hope, and release from the captivity that we've been in. And church, I hope that you've experienced that grace yourself. If you haven't, you can certainly call out to God with your anguish, with your hurts, with your sorrows, and say, God, why me? But I hope that someday you'll be able to look back at those times and also be able to say, God, why me? Why did you intervene? Why did you rescue me? Because there's tremendous energy when we experience the grace of God and know that there was nothing about us that made us any different, any better, any worse than anybody else. But for whatever reason, God reached out and touched our lives, gave us life, gave us hope, gave us a future, and said, simply because I love you. May that amazing grace be yours today. And may you be able to see his hand at work in your lives. And may your hearts be filled with emotion, including joy and gratitude, peace and hope. And may we then take that same grace that we've received and bring it to others as well. I encourage you to come back next week. We might ask the question, why not me? That's a very different question. And then Sunday morning, we're going to be talking about fights and quarrels and what causes them among us. And we'll talk about when the grace for each other runs out. And so Thank you for joining us this morning. May God bless you richly, and may you have the eyes to be able to see in all the ways that He is blessing you. Peace.